So, as was just mentioned, I am a model. This is what a model looks like. Sometimes it can look glamorous. Sometimes it can be cool. It can be sexy. But generally speaking, we all know what a model looks like. But I'm also an activist. So what does it look like to be an activist? Does it look like this? Does it look like these women? Perhaps you think of this guy. Or maybe it could look something more like this. So yes, I'm one of those annoying slashies, a model/activist. I know these worlds don't often really come together, but the more I've been continuing my work in both fields, the more that I'm seeing the intersections and the rebellious nature of fashion itself. So I've been modeling since I was 16 years old, and it's been a big part of my life ever since. But last year I started a social enterprise called House of Riot, where we aim to get young people involved in politics. So let me bring you back to the beginning of my life as a slashie. I was living and working in New York as a model, and I was really pissed off. I kept reading in the newspapers over there about the destruction of our Great Barrier Reef or our inhumane treatment of asylum seekers. We were being internationally shamed. This was also at the time that Medicare was under threat and university fee deregulation was on the cards. I was absolutely devastated, and I didn't really know what to do about it. None of my friends were involved in politics. I didn't really come from a particularly political family. But I felt like I had to do something. So I did this. I flew back to Sydney for Australian Fashion Week 2014, which was last year. And I hand-painted 100 T-shirts that look somewhat like this, with different political slogans on them. Each of the T-shirt slogans was developed with the individual wearing them. It was really important for me, for every person, to feel empowered by their own action, not just jumping on board some trend that was happening at the time. I didn't really realize this when I was doing it all, but in retrospect, I kind of organized my first ever protest. And it was hugely successful. We had global media coverage, which was great and really unexpected. It was picked up by US Vogue, French Elle, Brazilian Elle, all through Asia, and of course the local press too were really, really great. So now at House of Riot, we continue to make these T-shirts. We also make other apparel with political themes. We collaborate with NGOs. We donate 20% of our profits to charity. And we also branch out into other creative fields, working with local artists, musicians, dancers, writers. But primarily, we work in fashion. So one of the big things that I've learned throughout my time doing this is it's really important to know your audience and know how to speak their language. Now, fashion is something that speaks to us all. Through our clothing, we express our social alliances, our economic status, our moods, our personality traits, without even realizing you're sending messages and communicating to other people. So even if you don't think you're into fashion, we're all somewhat engaged in it. So fashion speaks to everyone. Now, I'm not the first person to use fashion to discuss politics. There have been many. I would like to bring up André Courges and Mary Quant. The reason why I'm bringing them both together is because it's widely debated over who invented the miniskirt. It both kind of came at the same time, but the miniskirt is what we're here to talk about. Now, nowadays, the miniskirt obviously isn't really seen as a political item, but at the time, it was different. Mary claimed that the miniskirt was liberating and practical for women because it allowed this ease of movement. And now I know anyone that's worn a miniskirt in the audience is thinking, it's not that easy to move in a miniskirt. But if we consider that we've just come out of the 50s, where the fashion was like this tight kind of corset and then this big bustling skirt and this like kitten heels. Have you ever tried to run in a kitten heel? It's like difficult. So yeah, the looser shapes of the 60s that widened out in the waist and then were kind of a bit more free at the bottom were obviously a lot more easy to move in. But the 50s didn't just bring us these hourglass shapes. It was also a time when women were owned by their fathers and then palmed off to a suitable husband for marriage. So the liberation of the 60s brought women independence and sexual freedom, and this was expressed through the miniskirt. This was fashion's reaction to the women libs movement. It was great. But fashion doesn't just mirror politics. It can also bring about social change. I'm sure we've all seen this, Madonna's cone bra. This was the work of the bad boy of fashion, Jean-Paul Gaultier. But he also made it in his menswear. So the corset is such a symbol of femininity and even of female oppression. But the way that he brings this into his menswear really breaks down the gender binaries that constrain us all. And this is like a constant theme of his throughout all of his history working. In one of his first men's collections in 1984, he brought about the first men's skirt, well, the first in Parisian fashion for like hundreds of years, which was groundbreaking. He also uses trans and genderqueer models in his advertisements and runway shows. On the right side up here is Andrea Pevic. She is a long-term muse of Jean-Paul Gaultier and also a trans woman. So these statements that he's making challenge societal norms, and they push towards more acceptance of the LGBTIQ community. So these might not really be seen as direct political acts, but for political change to happen, we must speak up. And this is people speaking up. So who else in the fashion industry is speaking up? Nazir Mazar. I read a really amazing quote from this young London designer the other day who said, "Why would I use a modeling agency that only has 2 black faces? That's not healthy, and that's not London." Totally nailed it. Diverse racial representation is really important across all media, including fashion. If the broader community had more acceptance of people's cultural diversity, this would surely lead to changes in our immigration policy. And this would be particularly beneficial for Australia right now. And I feel that no conversation on fashion and politics interrelationship would be complete without a massive hats off to Vivienne Westwood, surprise, surprise, the godmother of punk. Her early collections really encapsulated the spirit of the political punk movement. And do you think that that political movement would have had as much steam and lasting memory if it wasn't for the pop culture facets of fashion and music? This gave people another way to connect with the political movement. And then further, it gave them another way to express themselves outwardly and show others who they were politically affiliated with through their apparel. And Vivienne continues to use her high profile to put forward her political beliefs through climate revolution. This is a movement that she's started aimed at getting people and politicians to act on climate change, really the mother of all issues. She does this through fashion film, through her clothing, public demonstration, and encouraging other people, particularly young people, to participate in public debate and political action. So these are just a few examples of people who inspire me. People that use the tools within their own sphere to make a change in the world, and people who speak the language of fashion. We really need to be innovative when we are thinking about social change and activism. We all have skills, and we all have a voice. It's time to use them. Thank you.
Ollie Henderson, ladies and gentlemen.